All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar regarding the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. Um, I want to say hello and welcome and do some logistics before I turn things over to my boss and our CEO, John Carl Casa, as well as Congressman Courtney and our panelists. I am Ben Shakin. I work at the Connecticut Community Nonprofit Alliance, where Connecticut's statewide trade association for nonprofit organizations. I'm their director of government relations. We've got north of 250 people registered for today's event, which we're very excited about, both from our membership as well as from a lot of other constituencies that are eligible for this program. Because of that, we are going to have an agenda with some remarks that to start things off, followed by a presentation by Heather Jarvis, a student loan expert, and then we will be joined about 12:30, halfway through, by Aoife Delargy-Lowe from Equal Justice Works and Ashley Harrington from the United States Department of Education, who can help moderate a question and answer session. So all of you who are watching are in a webinar mode, which means that you can see and ask questions in the Q&A section, which is how we would like you to pose any questions that you might have. It's easier for panelists to go through lots of them that way. We'll also try to keep an eye on the chat, but if you can please try to ask your questions in this Q&A section, that would work best. And then depending on how much time we have and how quickly we're running through things, I may ask you through Zoom as the host to unmute yourself and ask your question live during the Q&A section later in the event. So again, thank you very much for being here. We're excited to talk about this important program. And I want to introduce our president and CEO, John Carl Casa.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you all for being here today. I won't take too much of your time. There's a lot of important information we need to get to you. But I do want to thank you for attending. This comes at a confluence of a couple of issues that are common in states all across the nation. First of all, the burden of student debt on people who are entering and working their way through the workforce. But secondly, the difficulties that nonprofits and other employers have had in attracting and retaining workforce. And nonprofits can't provide services to people who need them without that workforce. The loan forgiveness program is a way to reward people who have dedicated their lives to service to others. It gives a benefit to folks who are working for nonprofits, which is good for nonprofits as an employer. It's good for the people who are served by them. And it's, of course, good for the person who is spending their career working there. I want to thank Representative Courtney, has been a champion for this program for a long time. And I think the fact that we're having it today shows the kind of dedication he's had to it and to the people who are in need. So thank you all very much for being here. I don't want to take too much of your time. I hope it's all very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, John Carl. And as I come to you from my backyard in Connecticut's beautiful 2nd Congressional District, I want to introduce my Congressman, Congressman Joe Courtney.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. I love the birds in the background there. It's really, the best Zoom background I've ever seen. So anyway, thank you to the Alliance and to John Carl and to the panelists for being here today. This is really, such important information, particularly for your colleagues that are in the nonprofit sector, as well as other people who are in the public sector, to take advantage of an extraordinary benefit that was created back in 2007. As John Carl said, I've been pretty involved with it. I was actually a freshman member of the Education and Labor Committee, and we passed it in the first 48 hours or 72 hours of the Congress that was convened back then. It was a huge bipartisan vote. George W. Bush signed it into law. It was built around there was a series of items that were in the College Cost Reduction Act, but the Public Service Loan Forgiveness was one of the real crown jewels that set up a system that rewarded people who made the important decision to devote their lives to working in the public sector and in the nonprofit sector, sometimes at some financial loss, but whose skills required a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, and giving them the benefit of loan discharge after 10 years of continuous service and non-default in the student loans was something that, again, was a very sort of popular bipartisan concept. Fast forward to 2017, the first cohort of eligible borrowers tried to queue up into the system and then ran into just an unbelievable series of roadblocks and bureaucratic confusion, bank confusion, loan servicer confusion, and the discharge rate was an appalling, really 2 or 3%. I mean, it was. We had hearings at the Education and Labor Committee. Fast forward to 2021, we have a new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who we all know in Connecticut as a former school teacher and Commissioner of Education, who basically has been really responsible more than almost anyone else in terms of resetting this program with a waiver system, which you're going to hear a lot about in a few minutes. And we are already seeing really exciting results of people who had been so frustrated and unable to access a coherent system to get what the law required, is now being untangled, and with Heather, who's going to do, I think the webinar brief, can explain sort of the logistics in terms of how people can connect to this new streamlined program, which is not doing anything more, frankly, than just following the intent and letter of the law. I mean, that's what I think was so awful about the roadblocks that people were running into, because they literally had planned their lives around that sort of financial plan that the College Cost Reduction Act created. So again, today's all about how do you connect to it and not hear the ancient history. And I again just want to thank the Alliance for doing this and recording it, because certainly I think there's a lot more people in Connecticut, not just in the 2nd District or who's listening today, that I think will find it of incredible benefit. And as I say in the House, I'll yield the floor at this point to back to Ben, and again, look forward to hearing all the great results that's going to emanate from today's session.
Thank you. Thanks for helping us put this together, Congressman. This was a brainchild of folks in your office and you, and so we're very happy to do it and to make the recording available to folks far and wide. As we said in some state legislative testimony this year, there's millions of dollars that are owed to student loan companies by nonprofit staff across Connecticut, and so programs like this are going to be really helpful and can be a huge benefit to the folks that work for our members, as well as for government entities and others. So at this point, as you mentioned, I want to introduce Heather Jarvis, who's a national student loan expert, and she can provide more information about her background. She's got a presentation for us today to talk about this program and also talk about the expanded eligibility that the Congressman mentioned that expires in October. So Heather, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you, Mr. Casa, Congressman Courtney. I'm so happy to be here and discuss these issues today. Public service loan forgiveness is a wonderful promise to people who pursue education and careers in public service. And we are now ensuring that promise is kept for student loan borrowers who have met the call to do public service that benefits us all. So a little bit about me, and then we'll go right into the substance. I'm an attorney. I first generation college educated. I borrowed $125,000 to attend Duke Law School. It seemed like a very responsible thing to do in order to meet my full potential and give back to my community. I have been a public service attorney for my whole career and have been focused entirely on student debt relief for more than a dozen years, including working with Congress on the College Cost Reduction and Access Act that created public service loan forgiveness, and the first of the income-driven repayment options that was workable for borrowers. So let's talk about what you need to do to figure out your own circumstances as a student loan borrower so that you can benefit from this relief. I do have some visual aids, so let me just share my screen and show you those. Are you seeing my slides now?
We are seeing the PowerPoint, not the slide screen.
Okay, I'll just switch this to my other monitor. That look better?
Now we see your desktop.
Oh, wow. All right, let me try again here one more time. How many screens do I have? Here we go. How about now?
Perfect.
Excellent. So there are a lot of different ways that federal student loans can be canceled. There are statutory discharge provisions for things like disability, death of student loan borrowers. There are borrower relief provisions for people who were defrauded by their schools. But today we're talking about how a student loan borrower can earn forgiveness of some portion of the debt that they borrowed for school based on their work in public service and or their payments for a long period of time under an income-driven repayment option. So before COVID-19 and the pandemic payment suspension, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program was really about jumping through many hoops. Borrowers had to make 120 qualifying payments on their student loans. And it was difficult for us to get credit for the payments we made. Folks were turned away for a payment that was $1 short or a day late, or when they were enrolled in the wrong repayment option. And so really what we were trying to communicate was that people had to make the right kind of payments on the right kind of loans while they were working in the right kind of job. And they also had to demonstrate all of this to the satisfaction of the loan servicing company in order to meet the rules of the program. So it was quite difficult for borrowers to understand clearly whether their loans were the right kind of loans, whether their repayment plan was right, when exactly a payment needed to be made, if it had to be made all at once or if it was made in multiple parts. So we won't spend a lot of time today talking about why people struggled to get credit for qualifying payments, but they did for many different reasons. There are really two main forgiveness provisions that we're discussing today. Public service loan forgiveness requires full-time work for a qualifying employer, which is very broad. It's all state, local, federal, and tribal government agencies and entities, and also work for nonprofit organizations that are structured as 501c3 organizations, and a few other nonprofits that are not structured as C3s. There is also another sort of loan forgiveness that is based on your selection of an income-driven repayment plan. So people who choose an income-driven repayment option can make payments according to their income over 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan. And then if a balance remains, get cancellation of that balance. Now, the income-driven cancellation is not tied to employment and doesn't require public service. But public service loan forgiveness can be earned in as little as 10 years of service and qualifying payments, and they can work in conjunction with one another. So, as we have been discussing, it's about looking to see how many payments we've been credited for that count towards forgiveness. So public service loan forgiveness, the goal is 120 qualifying payments. If you log in at studentaid.gov, which is really the hub for all federal student loan information, when you look under the details of your loans at loan type, you can see a field called PSLF, cumulative matched months. So public service loan forgiveness, cumulative matched months. And those are the months that have already been acknowledged by the system as qualifying towards the 120. Now, many of us are going to be able to see that payment count go up based on these rules that are in place temporarily. So President Biden has some additional authority during the time of national emergency based on some of the COVID legislations that enable the administration to relax some of the otherwise applicable rules. So for a limited period of time, we can have the payment history on our loans reviewed and get credit for more payments from the past than we would have previously accrued. And this is both towards public service loan forgiveness as well as towards the income-driven forgiveness provisions. Now, the public service loan forgiveness waiver, the relaxing of these rules, is set to expire on Halloween this year, October 31st, 2022. So there are some actions that you may need to take, and I want to show you how to know exactly which of these actions apply to you so that you can do what you need to do. So for this limited period of time, the Department of Education is going to count months of repayment rather than actual payments of specific amounts. So in the way that looks is that they're going to look back at the loan history for the months that we were in what we refer to as a repayment status. Repayment status just means that you were required to make payments, you were enrolled in some repayment plan, so you were not in an in-school deferment, and you were not in a default status where your loans had been delinquent for a long period of time. And so months in which you had time in a repayment status, whether or not you made payments or whether you made payments on any sort of loan or under any sort of plan, you may now get credit towards the long-term income-driven forgiveness, as well as public service loan forgiveness if you document your public service employment. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And that's one of the very key steps that you will need to take. Also, we may get credit for some periods of forbearance, not all, but some. Now, forbearance is a loan status that means that no payments are due. And when borrowers have struggled to make payments, sometimes loan servicing companies would recommend forbearance as a temporary way to stop making payments. That can sometimes be the right thing to do, but often it's better to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan that gives affordable monthly payments that can be as low as $0 for people whose incomes are low enough. So the Department of Education is going to review our loan history, give us credit for periods of forbearance that are 12 or more consecutive months, one right after the other, or 36 months of cumulative forbearance. So they'll look back at the history and count it up, and folks can get as much as 3 more years of credit towards forgiveness, depending on the forbearance history of their loan status. Similarly, months spent in certain kinds of deferment, which is similar to forbearance, it's another way to postpone making payments, and except for in-school deferment, can count before 2013. So you may recall when we're enrolled in school more than half time, our loans are automatically placed in an in-school deferment status, meaning no payments are due. So months that you were in school won't count towards forgiveness. But if you were in another kind of deferment status, such as an unemployment deferment, those can count before the year 2013. Similarly, and this is very different than previous rules, time that you spent in a repayment status before getting a consolidation loan, which is a federal student loan that repays other federal student loans, is eligible to be counted towards forgiveness. In the past, when we would consolidate, the consolidation loan repaid the older loans and thereby made them disappear. So there was no credit given for payments made on those older loans that had been repaid. And now we can be credited for payments made prior to consolidation. So these are very expansive and different than the previous set of rules. So what do you need to do to benefit from this, right? What do you need to do? Well, know who your loan servicing company is. It could be Fed Loan Servicing, it could be Navient, Aidvantage, Mohila. These are all companies hired by the federal government to administer the student loans. You can see who your loan servicing company is at that studentaid.gov website, where you log in with your federal student aid username and password, and you can look for your loan servicer there. Vital step, and please don't underestimate the importance of this, is to check, verify, update your contact information, both with your loan servicing company and with the Department of Education through the studentaid.gov website. We each have a profile there, and it's important to have your contact information clear in both places so that you can be contacted both by the Department of Education directly, as well as from their servicer company that is administering your loans. And then you'll want to get an inventory of your student loans. It can be really confusing. We all borrow a lot of different kinds of student loans, private student loans, federal student loans of many types. So get an inventory by looking at studentaid.gov for your federal loans, and I'll show you how that looks. And if you're wondering about your private loans, take a look at your credit report. You can get a free one at annualcreditreport.com. And any education loans you see on your credit report that you don't see on your federal student record are going to be your private loans. Sadly, these forgiveness provisions do nothing to help us with our private student loan debt. The federal government is not in a position to forgive loans that are not owed to the federal government. So private student loans are not included in this relief. So let me show you some stuff about this studentaid.gov site, which is really where you'll do the work. Log in with your FSA username and password. You can create one or update it, have it issued to you there if you need to. And then understand that you can get credit for all different kinds of federal student loans if, and this is important, if you consolidate loans into a direct consolidation loan before October 31st, 2022. So you'll need to check to see if your loans are already direct student loans or not. If you have direct student loans only, they don't have to be consolidated because they're already direct loans. The reason to consolidate is if you have loans that are not direct loans and you want to get forgiveness on those loans, you have to consolidate them into direct. And it's because you have to owe them directly to the federal government in order for the federal government to forgive those loans. Some of these older federal loans that we have are owned by banks and private lenders. There were old programs that we borrowed from years ago that are federal loans, but they're not owned by the federal government. They're commercially held. And that's why we need to consolidate into direct if our loans are not already direct. Now, Parent Plus loans have been excluded from the limited public service loan forgiveness waiver, so they are not having any relaxed rules applied. Parent Plus loans are technically eligible for forgiveness, including public service loan forgiveness, although it's much harder to achieve it for Parent Plus loans because the repayment options for those loans are very limited. That's a conversation for another day, but I would encourage our advocates in Congress, including Congressman Courtney and others, to focus at some point when the time is right on expanding some debt relief for parent borrowers who struggle as well. Now, federal student loans come in all different flavors. You likely have loans called unsubsidized loan. You may have Grad Plus loans, Perkins loans, subsidized loans. All these are examples of federal student loans. They can be direct federal loans, or they might have come from these older programs. So what you need to check is whether your loans are direct. And here's some screenshots from my own loan accounts. You can see that I have logged in, and so my name is shown there in the top right. And when you log in to studentaid.gov, you'll see this dashboard of loans. And what you want to do is click to view details on the loans. When you view details, you'll then have an option to view a breakdown of your loans. And you can see I had 18 different federal student loans with 8 different servicers. And so this all sort of shows like just how really old I am. So then once you get into the My Aid summary, you have to click to view the breakdown of your loans. And then you'll see your loan servicing company there. Mine is Navient, and you can see it listed there. And you can see the breakdown of my loans. Now, there's one more step for me to figure out if these loans are direct or not. And it's to click that View Loan Details. Once I do that, then I arrive at something called loan type. That's what you need to know. What is your loan type? And if you see, mine says FFELP consolidation. That stands for Federal Family Education Loan Program. And this was a federal student loan program, but it was commercially funded. So this loan needs to be reconsolidated into direct. When you look up your loans, what you want to see under loan type is the word direct. If it says direct unsubsidized or direct subsidized or direct consolidation, then you don't need to consolidate because your loan is already direct. If it doesn't have the word direct in the name of the loan, it's not a direct loan, and you will need to consolidate or reconsolidate that loan. And so once you determine that, you go to the direct consolidation loan electronic application, which is also available through the studentaid.gov site. You want to click on the Manage Loans menu, and then you will have a chance to use the electronic application for consolidation. And I can't emphasize this enough. You have to do this before October 31st of 2022. The authority for this program may expire, and the department has chosen this date as the date by which we must consolidate non-direct loans in order to receive this expanded access to forgiveness. The other big thing, in addition to finding out what kind of student loans you have and consolidating any federal student loans that are not direct, is that you must certify your qualifying public service employment if you are seeking public service loan forgiveness. And you ought to do this through the PSLF help tool that is also part of the Student Aid website, studentaid.gov. So the employment certification form looks like this. It's referred to these days just as the PSLF form. And you will include some demographic information and then have to have your employer certify that you work there. So the way to do this is to use this PSLF help tool on the website. The reason to use the help tool, if you haven't in the past, is that it accesses a database of already certified public service employers. So you can circumvent any additional review of your employer's qualifying status by using this database. And so the help tool, again, also at that studentaid.gov site, and what you do is you click to add an employer, and then you need to have your employer's federal employer identification number. So their federal EIN, and that's critical. So everyone make a note of that. What you need is your employer identification number. That's the federal EIN. It's not the same as the state number. And when you put in that number, oh, here's where you can find it too. It's on your W-2 right there in box B is the number that you're looking for. So check your W-2s from back as far as you need to, back as far as October 1st, 2007 is the first time that we can get credit for our public service. So for each employer that you've had, that's a public service employer, you'll need to file one of these forms. using that number. And then you'll be given a populated form after you've completed this process, and you have to print it, sign it, and submit it. So it's not truly an electronic application like the consolidation application is. It's a process of populating the form in order to certify that your employment is already qualifying. And then you want to be aware that you must have what's called a wet signature. I had to learn this phrase relatively recently. It wasn't something I knew about before. So a wet signature can be hand drawn, like on a mouse pad or using your mouse, but it cannot be typed on your computer. So you know how sometimes you'll have the ones where it converts your typing into like a cursive font. That's not a wet signature, and that's not good enough for this certification. You can draw it on paper and then take a photograph of it and drop it into the form. That is allowed. But truly digital signatures are not presently accepted on this form. My understanding is that there are efforts to improve that underway as well. And so last couple of things I'll say before we switch to our Q&A period. Student loan payments are currently set to resume September 1st. It's possible that will be further extended. And in order to be prepared for that eventuality, it makes sense, as I mentioned earlier, to keep your contact information up to date in two places, your loan servicer and your studentaid.gov profile. But also you can experiment with the loan simulator tool to see what your payments would be under various repayment options. And if you have not already reached forgiveness, so you may earn credit for more payments from the past, but still be some time away from your forgiveness, then you may need to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan in order to be making qualifying payments after the limited waiver period has concluded. So there will be a time when the limited waiver is not in effect, and those of us who are still working towards forgiveness will need to make sure that we're clear on the rules that apply. And it will be more similar to the old rules, where you'll need to be cautious about the repayment plan that you are enrolled in, as well as the student loan types that you have. Direct loans only eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So I do want to emphasize that loan servicing companies have a busy, a lot to do, particularly with these limited waivers in place. There's a lot of work being done, and it takes time. So it's fair to ask student loan borrowers to be patient as these new rules are applied to our loan accounts. Also, do keep an eye on your loan servicing company and on your payment count, because errors do occur, and you are best able to see those and work to correct them. It isn't prudent to assume that your loan servicing company is going to get everything right the first time. That has not been our experience. I do want to also mention the Department of Education has completed a negotiated rulemaking process around these programs, including income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness, which means they'll be issuing some new regulations. And those new regulations will work to improve the administration of these programs and make it easier for borrowers to accomplish the crediting of payments towards forgiveness. But that said, there's some uncertainty right now about exactly what those rules will look like. And they will take effect likely summer of 2023, unless they are implemented on a fast track. But there is no definitive language that we can refer to right now about exactly what we'll need to do going forward from 2023. So it is always smart as a student loan borrower to plan to be engaged and informed about these issues. And the best place to get accurate information is at studentaid.gov. Do also be careful about debt relief companies. There are some entities that are working to defraud student loan borrowers and just earn a buck. And so if somebody contacts you and is, asking for payment in order to consolidate, you don't have to pay anyone to consolidate. You can do that yourself for free at studentaid.gov. And you should not enter into any kind of subscription service for assistance with your student loans. Those can be expensive and worse than useless. President Biden is considering some additional debt cancellation. The administration has canceled a number of student loans for people who should have had them canceled many years ago for things like disability or being defrauded by their schools. The administration has very quickly been implementing these waiver provisions and granting forgiveness and additional credit towards forgiveness for many student loan borrowers. It's also under consideration to implement some additional forgivenesses. And so do stay informed and aware. You're likely to hear things in the news. There is no announcement today unless Ms. Harrington has one that I'm not aware of, but stay tuned for those things. So thanks so much. I think that reaches the conclusion of what I wanted to say, and we're going to go right to our Q&A. My dear friend Aoife is going to moderate along with Ben, and I've been joined by Ashley Harrington from the Department of Education. Ashley is a longtime advocate for student loan borrowers, a fantastic attorney who is working to improve things for all of us within the Department of Education. So good to see you, Ashley.
Good to be here. Thanks for putting all this together, everyone.
All right, I have collected the questions in order, Ben. So do you want me to take it away?
Yeah, go for it.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question we got in was from someone who's had student loans from the 1980s. And she's been in the nonprofit sector since. And she was told by her current lender that she wouldn't qualify for loan forgiveness because her loans weren't directly given to her from the Department of Education. I know you talked about FEL loans and all that. Heather, do you want to just kind of reiterate that process and where you would need to get to? And obviously that emphasis on payments after October 1st, 2007.
That's right. So October 1st, 2007 is the first date that this borrower, any of us, could progress towards public service loan forgiveness. So, but you can earn forgiveness of much older loans only if you consolidate into the federal direct program. So this borrower should log in at studentaid.gov, drill down her loan into her loan type through the loan details and the loan breakdown until she sees the name of the loan types. And she may well see multiple different things. It's very likely that she'll have FEL loans from the past. And then do a direct consolidation application under the Manage Loans sub-menu, and also begin the process of certifying employment since October 1st, 2007, using that federal employer identification number and the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov.
Thanks, Lee and Heather. Ashley, I'm going to give you this question, and this is kind of synthesizing multiple questions that come in. Can you talk about not only full-time public service employment during this process, but also consecutive work? Does it have to be consecutive? Do you have to remain in public service for 10 years? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's a really good question we get all the time. And Heather, thank you for breaking that down. I just want to say, for folks who have been told before they have the wrong type of loans, that's what this waiver is for. This waiver is for you. And so Heather broke down how you find out what type of loan you have. But the biggest thing I want to say is, if it hasn't worked for you before, try again. please try again, because the changes that we are making are very real. Now, on the employment, so you have to be full-time employed with a public service employer. So is this here where you want me to talk about 30 hours a week and part-time, just to be clear?
Yes, let's do that.
So you can get qualifying credit if you are working the equivalent of full-time at multiple qualifying employers, as long as it equals out to 30 hours a week. So if I work 15 hours a week at a 501c3 nonprofit, and at the same time I'm working 15 hours a week at a state agency, that all the time where I'm working at both of those and I'm working 30 hours a week, I can still get credit for those months towards public service loan forgiveness, as long as I certify my employment with both employers, right? And the time overlaps. So that's exciting. Does it have to be consecutive? Absolutely not. I always like to say, get your 120 how you can. It can take you 15 years. It can take you 20 years, however long it takes you to get to 120, as long as it is 120 months of repayment after October 2007, when PSLF started, and you have that qualifying employment, you can get credit. It doesn't matter if you did 5 years, took 10 years off, came back into the other 5 years. We don't care. You just have to get to 120.
Thanks, me and Ashley. So Heather, can you talk a little bit about Parent Plus loans and co-signer parent relief under this current waiver? Like, are they eligible for this waiver? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So Parent Plus loans are not eligible for the relaxation of rules under the limited waiver. They are eligible for public service loan forgiveness, but a borrower with Parent Plus loans is not permitted to choose any of the income-driven repayment options until he or she consolidates the Parent Plus loans into a direct consolidation loan. Then a direct consolidation loan that repaid Parent Plus loans is eligible for one income-driven repayment plan called income contingent repayment. And income contingent repayment does tend to have somewhat higher monthly payments for most borrowers than the other income-driven plans do. So a parent is likely to have to pay more each month in order to be making qualifying payments towards PSLF. And the cancellation would be based on the parent's employment in public service, not the public service employment of the student on whose behalf the parent did the borrowing. So parent loans are owed by the parent, not the student who attended school. And so it's the parent's public service that could achieve loan cancellation ultimately.
Thanks, me and Heather. So we're getting other questions kind of, and I'm synthesizing a few here of people who haven't finished school yet and are trying to figure out, what do I do when I graduate, when my loans start? Like, how does this apply to me? What's best practice for me going forward to make sure that I'm going to be eligible for this relief? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in school, that means you're not in repayment right now. Your loans are deferred for most folks. Now, I will say, if you're in grad school and you have grad school loans, but you also have undergrad loans, you may want to opt out of that in-school deferment so you can consolidate all of your loans together, because then that entire consolidation loan is going to get credit for all the payments, since that would qualify for the undergraduate loan as well. So that's just something to think about. We can talk more about that if it would be helpful. But if these are your first loans and you're trying to figure out how you prepare for this, the first thing you want to do is that when you enter repayment, you want to make sure you signed up for an income-based repayment plan. And you can use our loan simulator at studentaid.gov to help model what will be the best plan for you. But you want to be on a standard plan or the income-based repayment plan to continue working towards PSLF after October 31st of this year. And the best plan to get the most out of PSLF is always going to be an income-based repayment plan, because if you're on a standard plan in general, you probably won't have anything to forgive at the end of 10 years. So you want to be an income-based repayment plan. You want to find the one that's best for you. So whenever you go into repayment, after your in-school deferment, after your grace period, make sure that you're on an income-based repayment plan. And then you want to certify your employment every year, every time you change a job. You don't have to do that. You can wait the entire 10 years and then submit all of your employment But it doesn't hurt to just go ahead and submit this. You don't have to worry about it later. You know, you can watch your progress go up. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Go ahead and get that in so you can make sure nothing's wrong, that all your employers qualify. So every year it doesn't hurt to certify. If you're recertifying your income, why don't you submit your PSLF form? If you change jobs, submit your PSLF form. So the best way you can prepare is to be on the right repayment plan and stay on top of your employment certifications.
Thanks, me and Ashley. So the next question that we had, what about someone who, had multiple, situations of employment, and they're now only realizing, oh, you know what, there's 7 years behind me that I didn't get certified. Is that too late for them to certify? Like, what can they do now? Heather, do you want to take that one?
Never too late to certify your public service employment. You may do it at any time. And it's best to use that PSLF help tool to populate the form so that you can see whether your employer has already been certified as qualifying. There is an option. It's possible that if you were employed far enough back for a nonprofit that it's difficult to find someone to sign your form. There are some nonprofits that go, out of business after some time. So there is a box you can check on the form if that's the case for you, to say to the Department of Education, I can't get anybody at HR anymore because this place doesn't even exist. And then the department will work with you to provide additional documentation if needed to certify your employer. But the best practice is to use the help tool, the federal EIN, and then have the wet signature of your employer and submit that form as instructed on the form. And you can do that at any time. As Ashley said, it's prudent to do it every year and whenever you leave an employer, but you're not required to, so you can do it after the fact, and that's not a problem.
Thanks, Heather. One question that we've gotten in is about defaulted loans. And Ashley, I know there was an announcement around defaulted loans and that fresh start recently with this waiver. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so fresh start is we are going to make it so that everybody who is in default before the payment pause, they will get a fresh start on their loan. So they're going to come out of this current payment pause in good standing. Their credit will be in good standing. They'll be able to get Title IV aid again. They'll be able to apply for federal mortgages and other loans. So we want to give everybody the opportunity to get back on track with their loans. They'll be able to get an income-based repayment plan, stay on track. Many of them will probably be able to get a $0 payment. But for default and PSLF, payments made while in default do not count towards PSLF. However, you can get credit for all of those payments all the way up until you officially went into default, right? So you can get payment right now under the waiver for even those months where you were just delinquent. You can't get forgiveness while you're in default. So you want to take advantage of this fresh start and stay on track so you can keep working towards forgiveness. Like, we can't process your forgiveness while you're in default, but you can get credit for months before you went into default. You can get credit for months once you get back on track towards that 120 once you get out of default with this fresh start. So this can still work for you. It is not the end of the road for you if you're in default right now. These programs can work together and you can get back on track if you're in default. Thanks,
Amelia, for that. Consolidation. We've had a few questions about, does that, restart the clock when you do that for the purposes of this? Can you re-emphasize that, Heather, that, when you do consolidate, don't worry, you're still going to get those payments that you made before consolidation.
Absolutely. And it makes sense that people would be confused on this point because it is a rule change. And people like me and Ashley and you, Eva, have been telling people for years, if you have already made qualifying payments on a direct loan and then you later consolidate it, you will lose the credit you had previously accrued on the underlying loans. That was true. It is not true right now during the limited waiver. And you may well see language that warns you, hey, you're about to consolidate. Are you sure you want to do this because you're going to lose credit for payments you made on the underlying loans? That is not the case under the limited waiver period. So if you consolidate before October 31st, then you will retain credit. In fact, as Ashley had mentioned, the consolidation loan will be given credit towards forgiveness for the maximum number of months that were attributed to any of the underlying loans. So there is no risk that you will have less credit towards forgiveness by consolidating, consolidating is necessary to make your loans direct. And Aoife, let me just also briefly address that refinancing loans with a private lender is not the same as consolidating with the federal student loan program. So some people have refinanced their loans with private lenders who issue loans to repay other student loans, whether they be federal or private. But those refinancing loans are private loans that are not owed to the federal government, so they cannot be forgiven. And so when we say consolidate, we're not talking about going to, Common Bond, SoFi, Earnest, or any of those places. We're talking about studentaid.gov and federal direct consolidation loans.
Thanks, Ian, for that, Heather. So someone has just asked for the consolidation link to that form. We'll put that in the chat momentarily. We've had two questions, obviously, from leaders at nonprofits that are saying, how do I make sure that my employees know about this? What information should I be sharing with them? Like, can you give some, top 5 between the two of you of places that you should be pointing people in the direction of that's going to help them with this process?
Yeah, and we have some employer toolkits that we can provide for you. But I think the best thing is you want to send them to studentaid.gov, make sure that they have an account, that they're getting updates, that they can look at their account. That's where they're going to find the help tool. That's where they're going to find information about PSLF and the waiver. That's where they're going to find information about their loans. That's where they manage their loans. So you want to make sure that they are going to studentaid.gov. You can make sure they know their EIN, right? A lot of us don't know. And we don't need, we can go find our pay stub, we can go find our W-2, but you can make it easier on your employees if you say, hey, here's the EIN you should put in that help tool. And you can also tell them, here's who can sign your form, here's who in HR you can send it to, here's the email address you can send it to for easy processing. So you can make it easier for your borrower, for your employees to get through the PSLF process. And I think that goes a long way, just giving them information, pointing them in the right direction and letting them take it from there.
Thanks, me and Ashley. Heather, anything you want to add on that?
I would also say that, the administration's commitment and Congress's commitment to public service loan forgiveness has become clear. I think that in the past, borrowers and employers both were somewhat reticent about relying on the forgiveness program. There was fear that it wasn't going to last or that it wouldn't work properly, and those fears were well founded. There have been problems with the program, but now it has been acknowledged that public service loan forgiveness is an essential tool to recruit and retain people in public service positions. It can be a very effective program, and I commend this administration for taking the necessary actions to bring people to where they should be, so that the promise of public service loan forgiveness can be enjoyed by those who have earned it.
Thanks, Ian. So we're kind of getting a couple of questions, and I think we should just re-emphasize just the process of this. I currently work for a 501c3, but I've not been employed for 10 years yet, or have made the 120 payments. Do I need to wait to reach these benchmarks before applying? So, talk about the fact that this is an enrollment, but that there are steps along the way that can make it a lot easier for yourself when the time comes to put your hand up to the Department of Education and say, I've made 120 payments. Do you want to walk through those kind of best practices? And keeping in mind that some of this stuff you can do retroactively if you haven't been doing that.
Is that me?
Yes, Ashley, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you're not at 120, you want to get your forms in, get your employment certification, and it doesn't hurt. And you absolutely need to have at least one in. You need to have at least raised your hand to get the full benefits of the current waiver. Even if you're not at 120, get your paperwork in. I can't say it enough. I'm not at 120, I submit my paperwork, because I want to make sure that I am on the right track. And I like to watch my number get closer to 120 because it makes me feel better to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think just psychologically is very helpful, right? No, you don't have to do it. But if you want the most benefit out of the program, which we're through this waiver, get your paperwork in now. For any period of employment that you were in repayment for post-October 2007, get a PSLF form in. It doesn't hurt. And then you'll be able to track your progress. You know what you need to do. You know what your next steps are. Just get your paperwork in. It doesn't hurt. When in doubt, fill it out.
Thanks, Ashley. So, you know, there's a couple of questions in here of like, when is this program going to run out? Can we just at a higher level talk about the fact that the program is here to stay, but this waiver is ultimately trying to get, you know, individuals that were previously under the assumption that they wouldn't be eligible into the family of loans, basically, that gets them on track to earn forgiveness, like, you know, the next generation of public servants. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of in general terms, to Heather's point, we don't have a looking glass, but what's the next iteration of the program? Where do we see this going? Ashley, do you, or Heather? Which?
Oh, I thought it was to Heather. Is it to
Oh
me?
yeah, Heather, go for it.
Either way, so public service loan forgiveness is the law of the land. It's a statute. It's part of the Higher Education Act that controls federal student loans. It could be changed by Congress. Congress has the authority to make changes to laws and do things, but it is not subject to the appropriations process. So there is no sort of running out of funds like there might be with some programs where they're on the books, but they only last as long as there's money to spend. Public service loan forgiveness operates more like an entitlement program. These loans are owed to the federal government, so the federal government can decline to continue to accept payments on them and can forgive these loans, which is not the same as, you know, writing a check. So public service loan forgiveness is secure. There are also regulatory rules that are promulgated by the administration, the Department of Education. There are rules that are in place now that have been temporarily suspended under this limited waiver. So the program is being applied in a generous way, in a look back, in order to get everyone on track and a fresh start. And then we will have new regulations that will apply to the program going forward. So for many years, I've been following this program since before 2007. It has never been more secure than it is right now. So, but it is possible that a future Congress could say, hey, we don't want to do it quite this way. We want to do something else. Not easy for Congress to take benefits away from people, not often done. And as we know, you know, it can be tricky for Congress to reach agreement on things. So I'm not worried about it at all right now. I think public service loan forgiveness is secure, and you can count on it being there for you. But do stay, you know, vocal and involved in the process. Make sure that your elected representatives know how important this is.
Okay, last question, because I want to be able to hand it back over to Ben to wrap up. Refunds. Who is eligible for a refund if they've made over that 120 payments? You know, I know there's a bit of nuance there. Ashley, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and I'll also add that I've seen a lot of questions in the chat about, you know, I've already paid off a loan. Unfortunately, if you've already paid off a loan, we're not going to reinstate that loan to forgive it. That's it. That loan's not coming back. But if you still have loans, we can work with those. But if you've already paid off a loan, there's nothing we can do about that. For refunds, if once the waiver is applied to your account and you end up having more than 120 payments, because on a direct loan or a direct consolidation loan, if the excess payments above 120 are on that direct loan, direct consolidation loan, so you're getting forgiveness, right? You will get that money back for those extra months, only for the direct loan part, not the FEL loan part, not the Perkins loans part. But if you exceed that 120, you will get payments back. And people are getting checks back from the federal government for excess months that they've paid. If that is not a signal to you that this program works differently now, because people are literally getting money back for their student loans, then I don't know what is. So that's just another example of how we are really trying to make this program work.
Thanks, Lee and Ashley. Ben, I'm going to hand it back over to you now, okay?
Thanks, and thanks to Heather and Ashley and UEFA for this very informative question and answer session. There are a lot of questions, and I will say I am someone who's 5 months out or 6 months out of my application to have my student loans forgiven after the last 12 years in the nonprofit sector, but not making payments that would have qualified me under the previous system. And so I just urge folks to have patience. I haven't gotten an answer yet, but I think everything's fine for me. And I also, just to bring things back around to your congressman, and I want to first thank Joe and Congressman Courtney and his staff for putting this together with us, to help our members, employees, as well as other folks who work in qualifying industries. But also urge you, if you have specific questions and you don't have access to an expert, to reach out to your congressman's office. There are constituent service staff at every one of your member of Congress's district office who specialize in the Department of Education, who I have at least found to be very helpful in taking a look at my particular situation, confirming what I think I've read out of the FAQs, writing a letter to the Federal Department of Education to get a response about my case specifically. And so if you feel lost and aren't sure exactly what to do after reviewing all of the information, please feel like you should call your member of Congress. They have staff that are there to help you. And over the last 2 or 3 years that I've been working on this for myself, I personally have found them to be very, very helpful in helping me understand what I need to do in order to make sure that my eligibility is there. So again, thank you all for being here. Special thanks to all of our presenters and to Congressman Courtney for putting all this together. We will distribute a recording and the slides to everyone who registered for this event, and we'll also make them available on our social media for folks who weren't registered. I'm sure the Congressman will as well. And thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.